What up, wherever you are situated in the world? Guess what time it is? It is Juneteenth. Happy Juneteenth, Dr. Sherice Janaye.
Happy Juneteenth. Happy Independence for Black Folk Day.
Let's embark on the Ark Republic to hear current news that's published. More than gossip and chatter, covering current affairs that matter. We talk issues with professional views, all keeping you in queue. We wanted a higher vibe for these days and times, to free the voices and minds, reporting the sign of the times, so all can build. Let's shine, yeah.
You know what I'm saying? I don't know about you, but I have been celebrating Juneteenth my whole life. I was raised in LA. Juneteenth is an annual celebration that's been going on. And so when it became a federal holiday, I was elated about it. And what about you? What is your Juneteenth experience?
So my Juneteenth experience is really connected to church because in the city of Richmond, so I grew up in Northern California, but I went to church in Richmond, and the city of Richmond threw a parade, a Juneteenth parade every year. And so I marched in the parade, as over the years, marching in different facets. Sometimes I would march with my church choir. Sometimes I would be inside of a car show because I would be in somebody's car, right? So there was always a parade, and then there was a festival after the parade. And the festival was all small Black business owners, right? Like you had to be, even in the diverse Bay Area, you had to be a Black vendor, right? Or predominantly Black vendor or Black owned to be a vendor at the festival. All small businesses, right? Sometimes some years there may be sponsors, right? There may be a corporate sponsor, but the corporate the corporate energy was small, right? It wasn't a big, and there was never like AT&T or Verizon or anybody big like that. It would be a large grocery store chain, like a Raley's, right? But it would be something that was homegrown, a corporation that was homegrown to the area, right? It'd be a local or a regional bank, right? So there would be some level of sponsorship or that kind of thing. And then there was a community stage, right? And there were acts that were put on, and they would have some level of headliner they would bring in. There would always be a headliner, but the stage would be open, so it would be spoken word. And there would always be a griot or an African griot that would come and then tell the history or the stories of how Black people migrated from where they migrated from to then live in the Bay Area, but especially in Richmond, that's a port city that had ports that Black men came to work. And so it was a very rich experience. So when it became nationalized, I thought to myself, well, great, right now there is not the same negotiation for the city of Richmond or the city of Oakland, who also had its own parade and had its own kind of activities, that there wouldn't be this same kind of negotiation because there would be that federal holiday that people would be able to take off then to do these kind of celebrations around, so you wouldn't have to be negotiating on these weekends. So I thought it was a great thing. But then, last year, seeing it celebrated nationally, there was just so much pushback and so much venom that people outside of Texas, right, were celebrating it. It kind of left a sour taste in my mouth.
The response of people who had never heard of or celebrated Juneteenth and the negative reaction to Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday threw me off. I must say this because it becomes a federal holiday during the pandemic. And the response was that people felt that Juneteenth becoming a federal holiday was kind of like this, let's give Black people a food stamp in the midst of all these racial protests and conversations that are going on. And I believe that people dismissed it in a way. So I was totally caught off guard. But let me tell you what Juneteenth was like for me growing up in Los Angeles. It was always, you said some very excellent points. It was a community gathering. It had nothing to do with sponsorships. Usually there is a parade. There's been a parade for a very long time on Martin Luther King, MLK Boulevard, right? You go to the Martin Luther King Boulevard, and usually there would be high schools, middle school, bands, marching, drumettes and stuff. Right? And then you had also in LA, you had the Black Cowboys. So, a lot of people don't know there is a significant cowboy culture in California, and there's also an equestrian or what do you call this? I forgot what they call it, equine or a horse
And
program.
for us, it wasn't horses, it was bikers. It was black.
Oh, okay.
For
Yes.
us,
Yeah.
it wasn't horses, but
It was bikers. Yeah.
It was black biker clubs.
Yeah, because you had it's the Picket Rodeo that you have right outside of LA. So you would have the Cowboys, and then you would usually have, because LA has a very strong HBCU alumni population, significantly, I would say a southern university, Grambling, like a Louisiana, Texas. So these alumni groups would often pay for the bands to come and perform.
Correct.
So you would also, as a child, be exposed to an HBCU band. And as well, Juneteenth would kind of be like the kickoff in LA for the summer events that would happen throughout the summer. LA, there's an LA city and then there's an LA County. LA County is massive and Black people are spread out throughout the county. So you would look forward to coming to these events on the weekend and see Black people. Like you said, there will be vendors, selling clothes, food, so on and so forth. So this is where you were able to purchase those Black cultural items that you would not get normally. And also, you would be able to see your cousins and them that moved out to Monrovia or the Valley or the outskirts of the city. You also would be able to experience the array and diversity of Black food. In LA, it was like you had Mississippi fried chicken, Jamaican patties, Belizean food. Of course, you had that Louisiana gumbo. You had all so that's what Juneteenth. It was a very community. It was very, I would say, lo-fi, but it was a significant annual event that I know my family thought it was important enough to go and just see Black people gather. So when people were dissing and still diss Juneteenth, I find that very problematic. But I'm gonna let you go ahead and talk about your response to it. Well,
Yeah.
Let me say that. I'm gonna let you go. Okay, and then I'll ask the question.
So I wanted to make sure I quoted her name correctly, right? So to me, it's very disrespectful to Opal Lee. It's very disrespectful to Opal Lee, and I want to make sure that I got her name because she is known as the grandmother of Juneteenth because she had been campaigning for decades. I mean, decades, right? Since this says since 1973. Right? That she had been advocating, pushing on Congressional Black Caucus members, right? Pushing on leaders, right, to do this. To me, the denigration of it becoming a federal holiday disrespects her. It disrespects the Black woman, Barbara Rose Collins of Michigan, who put it up as a piece of legislation. Because a federal holiday doesn't become a federal holiday. It has to then maturate through the United States Congress to be able to do so. So it disrespects, right, this Black woman. It disrespects the group of Black women that were primarily from the Congressional Black Caucus that pushed to get this legislation through, getting their colleagues on board. Because again, a federal holiday just doesn't become a federal holiday. It has to be a piece of legislation that's brought up in the House or in the Senate. It has to pass both houses, and then it gets to a president to then sign, right? So to me, the problem that I had with it is that you are then muting and quieting the Black women who pushed for this to become a holiday. I understand that the timing of it wasn't ideal for some because it felt like a rubber stamp, but I was appreciative that these Black women used the political moment to get something that they've been trying to get for years. This wasn't 1 year, 2 years, this was decades of trying to get this over the finish line. And they used the influx that the country was at a moment to then get to get a holiday, a federal symbol that forces America to deal with its history in a way that we are trying to hide it. We are trying to ban books and trying to stop from learning this history. By making this a federal holiday, you cannot erase this phenomenon from the history. And for those of you that don't know what Juneteenth is, it is the celebration of slaves in Galveston, Texas, finding out that they were free. That is what it
and
is.
had been for years. And had
Been for years, right? This is, but they were on this island of Galveston, Texas, and that they had been free for years, but unbeknownst to them, that their freedom was upon them, and they had no clue that was the reality. And so Juneteenth is June 19th, the day that then these slaves in Galveston, Texas, found out that they were free and that they had been free. And the idea that we live in an America that ignored the law and ensured that folks that were on an island, right, physically, were also on an island from an information perspective about their own freedom, and to be able to etch that into American history with a federal holiday, to me, is the most important aspect of the day. I understand there'll be, the capitalist engine is going to do what a capitalist engine does and tries to have sales and all the things that it's going to do. But the venom behind it, to me, is disheartening, because it removes the agency of Black women, and it removes the important part of how making this a federal holiday forever etches this history into American history.
Also, in my opinion, what this does is that it preserves all of the other emancipation celebrations that were going on
Yes.
prior to. So because Galveston, Texas, now what we all know historically, there were people who were still enslaved after that, right? Who did not know. But what Galveston, Texas, what Juneteenth does is that it kind of encapsulates all of these ceremonies that were going on in their own way. So that's why in different parts of the country, you have never heard of the term Juneteenth, but there were emancipatory celebrations and rituals. For example, on January 1st, which is when the Emancipation Proclamation comes out, a lot of formerly enslaved people would walk or buggy and carriage their way up to Washington, D.C. to celebrate it. So you see these forms of events or ceremonies happening throughout the United States. Juneteenth, fortunately, is one of the few to survive. So why are these celebrations not heard of or documented? Well, we talked already about the Jim and Jane Crow era, where you have this systemic oppression that also happened in our holiday celebrations. Hence why people don't know Memorial Day started in South Carolina, where Black people had to reinter Black soldiers who were dumped in a mass grave and bury them properly. Which goes to another point, I have to say. Okay, I'm on my due. I feel like goosebumps. I'm talking about this. My people talking. This eradicates the notion that Black American people do not have culture. I get so disgusted when I hear people say Black American people don't have culture, right? I don't know how you could bang hip hop all over the world and then call us culturalists, but that's a whole other conversation. But there are burial rituals, there are wedding rituals, there are rites of passage rituals, there are all type of rituals and culture that we have. But when you are in a constant state of terror, things get lost, right? So for me, what Juneteenth does is that it keeps these memories and these rituals alive, because we have them. So whether you've never heard of Juneteenth, I think celebrating this significant and historical moment should be wrapped in your Rolodex, because we do the Alamo, right? We definitely do July 4th, which every time July 4th, I can't say how many times a Frederick Douglass letter comes out on July 4th saying that not is truly the true liberation day for Black people. But then, I am deep into the Black people diaspora. Do you know how many Jamaican Independence Days I've gone to? And, then you have these liberation days and everything like that. So folding this into your annual celebrations will actually be very good for your soul, and it's very culturally relevant for you.
Well, and so it's funny that you say this about the cultural aspect because in many ways, from in a Southern perspective, Juneteenth was in many ways tied to homecoming celebrations that churches had during the summer, right? That they either did vacation Bible school and connected Juneteenth, or there were this cultural this cultural mashup that you're talking about. It and in many ways is proliferated or perpetrated really in many ways in Black church, especially in Southern Black church cultural traditions, that there is a celebration for Juneteenth, and that celebration for Juneteenth is often wrapped into some other Christian practice, whether it is vacation Bible school or a what they used to call tent meetings, right? Where they do revivals in the summer and tent meetings, right? That or church anniversaries, right? Because church a lot of times church a lot of Southern Black churches, their anniversaries are during the summer months, right? Because that's when a lot of oftentimes churches were started in the summer months, right before harvest, right? Because if you're harvesting in the fall, you know, so it's funny that you say this about this cultural piece, right? Or about this Black heritage piece, because in many ways, Juneteenth as a celebration has a thread, has an economic thread, right? It has a spiritual, right? A spiritual religious thread, right? It has a familial thread, right? Because there's always families that have histories, right? That talk about migration, or that talk about celebrations on the land that they're still on during this time frame. It's attached into family reunions, right? Because oftentimes Black families are having family reunions around that Juneteenth time frame. And so for you to highlight its importance in Black culture, I think also is a part of that level of frustration for me, for folks to say, oh, now all of a sudden everybody want to celebrate Juneteenth. There's some literature that says that by the early 1990s, over 200 cities in America were celebrating Juneteenth in an official capacity, right? So this is not something that, since the federal government decided to make it a holiday in 2021, I think it is, that and while we're still embroiled in pandemic, it is something that has had a long history and legacy, that in many ways has been a cultural norm for Black Americans.
And I want to also, oh, this is so good. I really am enjoying this conversation. I love it when we get into the cultural talks of our meetups. But let's talk about this familial conversation on the heels of a Representative Donald, right? For years, these gatherings were the only time where Black people could actually find their family members who were lost in slavery. And so so Juneteenth is not just, so our understanding of family reunion goes far deeper than just, us coming together and barbecuing, right? It really is you trying to find your tribe that had been totally fractured, sold off, in this horrible process. One, and then two, as well, Juneteenth is a celebration of a moment which drastically and radically changed the trajectory of the United States. That must be and should be celebrated, right? The end of slavery and the end of the Civil War drastically changes what we know as what the United States has become. So there's a lot of energy on that we must acknowledge. As well, as we all know, unfortunately, in the United States, we don't take a lot of days off. That is the complaint I get from a lot of people who are not from America. When they come here and they see we don't have a lot of vacation days, don't have maternity day, all this stuff, you know what I mean? So stop and breathe. Just from a mental health wellness perspective, allow yourself to just be at the very least on this day. Because I tell you what, a lot of these government workers are doing who are not Black. They're taking off Juneteenth to the on the other side of July 4th. So they're welcoming in Juneteenth, like, because it gives them a whole 2 week block to take off, which we should get anyway. So I wanted to also bring up the points. But I think what we're talking about, Sharice, is we do need to recover these other emancipation celebrations and what they look like to preserve an important part of our history and what these celebrations did to us, for us, and so on and so forth. So we are going to wrap this up. What are you doing this Juneteenth?
So this Juneteenth, I will actually be in St. Louis. My husband has become the pastor of the Mount Zion Missionary Baptist Church in St. Louis, and so it will be my very first Juneteenth in St. Louis. So I'll have to see what they do for St. Louis, and if there's not much, right, encourage a potential Juneteenth celebration, because the church is 165 years old this year. They were founded by 20 slaves, and some a large number of free people, all Black, got together to start this church in 1859. Right. So this very kind of, very long history. And so they normally celebrate their church anniversary. I think it's the 4th week in June. Well, if you think about it, that 4th week in June is the 23rd this year. It's the weekend right after Juneteenth. Right. Mm-hmm. And so I know that on the 22nd, they're having a fun day. They're, to celebrate the church anniversary. And so I'll be there on the 19th, on our actual federal day off. I will be in St. Louis, and prayerfully, it could be a tradition that we establish at the church, that we have a Juneteenth celebration in combination then with the church anniversary.
That is super dope. I will be in Philadelphia. I looked it up. Philadelphia is celebrating its 18th annual Juneteenth celebration. So Juneteenth has been around for some time here. But I also want to big up the Black Texans. You know what I'm saying?
Yes.
Like those Black Texans who embraced and maintained this legacy. It's very important. I think also as well, Black Texans are very pivotal in elections, and we need to give more credence, and as well those border states, because Galveston is not far from Louisiana, and also just the Black cowboy and Black cowboy culture and the ranch culture that often, I think, gets attributed to or credited to white cowboys. But the whole term cowboy comes, it's actually a derogatory term, is what names that they call Black, Mexican, and Native folk who handled the ranches. But I want to big up to y'all and wish you all a happy Juneteenth in the Texas diaspora, who I'm a part of. I got some family members. I actually had an uncle called Cowboy because he was a cowboy in Texas, bow-legged as I don't know what else. We knew Uncle Cowboy walking. His legs would be like so bold walking down the street. But happy Juneteenth to you and yours, Dr. Sherice Janaye.
Thank you so much. Happy Juneteenth to you too.
All right, we out.
Thank you for tuning into Arc Republic's news podcast. We are a small media organization with big news energy and cover topics from a global lens and work to uncover rich and robust stories. Any contribution towards our operation will fuel a much needed media revolution. So how can you do that? You can send money to our fundraising platform, which is arc-republic.fundjournalism.org/donate, or Cash App us at $ARC Republic Media, and stay tuned for ARC Republic News.